series. In the last episode, we touched on some thoughts about the AI doom discussion. And so I thought that it would be just fun to do a bit of a little reaction to an AI doom debate and weigh in a bit on that today. I wanted to have something I didn't need to research. So I haven't seen this. I'm going to be reacting to this video of Yudkowsky versus Wolfram. It may not actually be a very good video. It may not be a good debate. I haven't seen it. So if not, what we'll do is we'll pivot to another discussion that Yudkowskys have. I've seen this one with Lex. I've seen this one with George. I have seen, what else have I seen? This might be a good one. Wow, they're all so long. And I've seen this one is Bankless. So I'm pretty familiar with what he says, and I commonly see what his arguments, and I couldn't disagree more. We are not all going to die. This is not. I just firmly reject this thesis. So I have not seen this one with Wolfram. This is the most recent major debate that he's done. I really like Stephen Wolfram. I think sometimes when he talks, he kind of isn't necessarily the most engaging debater. So I'm not sure how this is going to be. But let's just dive into it and see how it goes. I'm not going to get through this whole thing today. This is over 4 hours. And then with my commentary on top of it, it would be like, who knows? I literally have reacted to 10 to 15 minute videos and have spent hours on that. So let's just start watching. And I think that the broad situation with AI is that they're currently successfully scaling them more and more powerful. We're not quite sure how long that process is going to continue using the current technology, and part of the reason we're not sure is that nobody understands what actually goes on inside a modern AI. We can look inside the computer, of course, but we see giant arrays of floating point numbers, and people are barely beginning to understand what's going on in there, and we do not quite understand where the power comes from. Chess did not stop playing when it got to human level. Go did not stop playing by the human level. They are past only training the AIs on imitations of human output and have moved on to training it on what works to solve problems, and you can just continue that process past the point where the problems are of human difficulty. So we're on course to get something smarter than us, whose innards we don't understand, which we cannot very well control, and this probably ends quite poorly.
We're making the statement that the one thing we think we know about the AIs is that they have been successfully trained to optimize their achievement of purposes. That's an assumption which is not totally obvious to me. I agree that as you give sort of all you're specifying is sort of play chess or whatever else. So you're specifying some big, what we think of as an objective. The details of what's happening inside, there will be aspects of that we are not in any way able to foresee, predict, whatever else. So if we took apart that mechanism and we say, is this mechanism doing what we expect here? It won't be. There'll be plenty of things where it's doing what it chooses to do, or because that particular training run gave this particular result or whatever else. To me, I'm not convinced yet. There are interesting questions to try to answer, which people should try and answer. I mean, you make it sound like it's urgent, the people are coming off the ships, and you might be right.
MLST is proudly sponsored by
Okay, yeah, that was just the intro, so we don't need to dive into that. But I don't like this thing. You might be right where you see that. I mean, yeah, obviously anyone could be right, but anyway, I don't like when people always say stuff like that. But let's just keep watching.
For AI Labs. They're based in Zurich. They're doing monthly meetups. And
wait, we are not putting this in here.
Strong that I
now 2forlabs.
Okay.
channel 10 to 5
Honor to have about AI MLST.
Okay, here we go.
backgrounds.
Here's the intro. Okay.
Gentlemen, it's an absolute honor to have you both on MLST. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to have a discussion all about AI existential risk. And Eliezer, first, if you wouldn't mind, could you just spend about 5 minutes talking about how much of a risk is AI to humanity?
I think the term risk is understating it. If there were an asteroid straight on course for Earth, we wouldn't call that asteroid risk. We'd call that impending asteroid ruin or something like that. And I think that the broad situation with AI is that They're currently successfully scaling them more and more powerful. We're not quite sure how long that process is going to continue using the current technology, and part of the reason we're not sure is that nobody understands what actually goes on inside a modern AI. We can look inside the computer, of course, but we see giant arrays of floating point numbers, and people are barely beginning to understand what's going on in there, and we do not quite understand where the power comes from. We, like, by great efforts, you can look in like the previous generation of the technology. I don't know if anybody's tried it with the current generation, and see it's currently thinking about the Eiffel Tower, or this is like the location where it stores the fact that the Eiffel Tower is in France, and we can move it to Rome by poking at the numbers, which is, pretty impressive.
Okay, so I do want to acknowledge here that it is a little awkward for me to be reacting to a debate, because I'm going to say something and then presumably Stephen Wolfram's going to say something. So who knows? I've not seen this, so I don't know how to inject commentary that's going to maybe not be duplicative of what someone else is going to say. But anyway, let me just pause him right here. First of all, he said, this is like an asteroid about to hit Earth, and we know this is going to happen. This is for sure. And then notice, he's starting to explain why this is such a problem. And his reason is because we don't know what's going on inside of the neural network. So he's sure it's going to kill us, but we don't actually understand any of it. And that's his whole point. The only thing we know is sometimes it's talked about the Eiffel Tower. That's all we know about it. And yet we know it's about to destroy the entire Earth. Anyway, let's continue.
Can't do that with a human brain.
And but before anyone gets triggered watching this, any AI Doom people, I know that he has thought of this. I know about instrumental convergence and all of that. So this is something I'm also thinking about in my reaction. I'm aware of his arguments in advance of watching this debate.
But the basic question of sort of like what's going on in there, how are they doing the impressive new parts, that's all unknown. If the technology continues to scale, which it may or may not, nobody knows, it at some points gets smarter than us, as smart as us, and then smarter than us. There's no particular barrier that I know of, or that I know of any principled reason to believe in at the human level. Chess did not stop playing when it got to human level. Go did not stop playing by the human level. They are past only training the AIs on imitations of human output and have moved on to training it on...
I'd say it's already smarter than us. In many ways, I mean, you can redefine that word, or you can define that word and can debate about the semantics of that. But it is smarter than us. I mean, ChatGPT knows way more than I do. Sure, I can have a specific question in mind, and I'm trying to get that answer, and I can't really get ChatGPT to give me a satisfactory answer. People call that an alignment problem. But just because I don't just, type in my product requirements for my company's product that we're building and it builds it perfectly for me, it doesn't mean it's not smarter than me. I think that already is not, it doesn't really hold up. So I don't think that reasoning in that way is a very good way of reasoning.
So we're on course to get something smarter than us, whose innards we don't understand, which we cannot very well control. And this probably ends quite poorly. There's a lot of mistakes.
It probably ends quite poorly. Probably. Oh, I thought it was a certainty. I thought this was an asteroid. And so basically you're saying it's smarter than us, metaphorically speaking. We don't understand it, and yet we know risk is an understatement. It's like a meteor that's about to hit the Earth. It's probably, and then now you're saying it's probably. Okay, I see.
Taken reasons to believe that it automatically ends well. It's various people have different mistaken reasons to believe it automatically ends well. There's I don't know if any of you, I don't know if you, the viewer, I don't know if any of the other people here have this particular mass apprehension, but people ask, why wouldn't they just trade with us? They have heard of Ricardo's law of comparative advantage, a very important theorem in economics, which says that even if one country is more productive at producing every kind of good than some other country, they will still end up trading because of the relative differences in productivity. If it is easier for me to make hot dog buns than it is for me to make hot dogs, I will ship you hot dog buns and get back hot dogs. Or like, if compared to you, I'm at less of a disadvantage.
This is a really bad opening. I mean, when you fear type of thing he usually talks about, I could be wrong about this. This is, I mean, he's not making a case. He's refuting a counter argument, but he's the one who's making a claim that needs to be substantiated. He should be talking about the instrumental convergence and how he's certain that as AI scales, it's going to kill everybody, and it's going, or at the very least, cause mass harm. He has not made that case, and he's just basically going off and addressing these random objections, which are not particularly relevant to the fact that the thing that he's worried about, he just simply has no argument that it's going to happen. His only argument is hand-waving smartness, more smart than us type of a thing, and argumentation as we watch the debate and dive more into that.
In making hot dog buns, that I'm at a disadvantage in making of hot dogs. We will both benefit by shipping.
We are talking about the potential end of the world, and we're just talking about hot dogs. This is just fundamentally not serious.
Hot dog buns and hot dogs back and forth. This unfortunately assumes the absence of a third option, which is for B to be so much the work.
That's never happened in his speaking.
Work produced by horses has to be worth more than the cost of feeding the horses. You can always benefit by trade, but
horses are not wild animals.
You can sometimes benefit even more by killing people and taking their land. I wish that wasn't a possibility, but it is. And so
a possibility? You wish it wasn't a possibility? I thought this was a certainty. I thought saying risk was an understatement.
There's all these reasons that people have for thinking that even if we don't understand AIs and can't control them very well, they could get much, much smarter than us and it could still end nicely. And I think these reasons are all mistaken. And so by default, this ends terribly. And I think that's my 5 minutes.
Nope. By default, it does not. By default, we don't know what's going to happen. You can't just say the default is that it kills everybody. That is like the null hypothesis is that it's basically nothing. This is just like any other technology. We just continue to grow. We use it. And you have to make the case that it's going to kill everybody because that's a very specific thing for it to do. I mean, I know there are arguments for that, but let's actually talk about these. Let's talk about these arguments instead of talking about hot dogs.
I mean, I guess it's interesting. I mean, my first statement is this notion of kind of an index of smartness is something that I kind of don't believe in. I mean, one thing that's sort of my personal experience for the last, 40-something years is I already know the computers are smarter than me. I mean, very tiny, simple programs where, you might have thought this is a really simple program. Surely I'm smart enough to figure out what this does, but no one's not. I mean, even last night, I was doing some experiments where I was pretty sure I knew what was going to happen, but no, the computational animal was smarter than I was, and it did things I didn't expect. So I've kind of, I guess my default point of view is I know the computational universe contains many things that I can't readily foresee, just as the physical universe contains many things I can't readily foresee. So the question then is, one thing one could take the point of view, there's this kind of single index of smartness. I mean, I think people, in the 1930s, people wanted to invent kind of an index of general intelligence. They called it G for humans, which I've never really believed in, because I've never really believed that.
I do believe in G. But by the way, Stephen Wolfram is a great person to have this debate, assuming that he brings his A game, which he seems to be doing a good job. But he really deeply understands physics and computation and the intersection of those two, because the types of fallacies that Yudkowsky falls into is he makes a lot of fallacies when it comes to the physical limits of scaling and stuff like that, and information theory, and this is something that Stephen Wolfram knows very well. So I love what he's saying so far. Except I do disagree. There is G. This is an important topic that maybe I'm going to make a mental note of that and maybe come back to discussing intelligence at the end of this. I think this actually is an important something that's tangentially important to the AI risk discussion. So let's continue watching.
There are some things I'm pretty good at doing where I feel I'm pretty smart. There are other things where I know I'm pretty dumb, and it's not really a sort of single index. I guess the thing that I wonder about in the kind of the AIs will be smarter than we are is to dig into what that really means. And I think the first thing to say is that the big limitation to whatever you might think smartness is this phenomenon that I call computational irreducibility.
Okay, let's talk about this. Very important. But the computational irreducibility, I really want to hear what he has to say about this. This is his idea. He has these. Well, no, I mean it's built on other ideas, but he really has built a lot on this, and he has these really cool physics projects that's exploring the implications of computational irreducibility. So I'm really interested to hear what he says next. But what I will say is, I think strategically talking about smartness is a bad idea for the debate because it's just not really the most important thing. It's not the crux of the disagreement. I think that's going to come into play when you talk about basically this idea that as AI scales in smartness, eventually it's going to, they have this idea that it's going to eventually use all of the atoms, and it's going to have a better use for your atoms than you do. And at that point, it's going to kill all humans so that it can use those atoms. It's this really wacky theory. And there's so many reasons to not believe that will happen. And I bet Stephen Wolfram could destroy that argument. But that's really the whole point. It's the fact that we cannot predict what a complex system is going to do. And I don't want to like reveal everything now about these arguments, but Yudkowsky thinks that he can, and he has these dumb reasons why he thinks he can predict that an AI will, what an AI is going to do and stuff. And I can debunk all of them, but let's let him actually make those arguments. But I think just addressing that one point makes the whole thing fall apart. I agree to talk about smartness. I flagged that. I thought that was just a dumb thing to say and just a dumb way of thinking about it. But at the end of the day, it's just not the most important piece of the puzzle.
The idea that if you have a computational system, the question is, can you jump ahead? We are used to the idea from lots of exact science over the last few hundred years that, the planets do what they do according to these laws of motion, but we can find a formula that lets us just work out what will happen in the end without having to go through all the steps. One of the things that's sort of a foundational fact that we can talk about, where it comes from, but the idea that if you have a computational system, the question is, can you jump ahead? We are used to the idea from lots of exact science over the last few hundred years that, the planets do what they do according to these laws of motion, but we can find a formula that lets us just work out what will happen in the end without having to go through all the steps. One of the things that's sort of a foundational fact that we can talk about, where it comes from, but, it's kind of the whole idea of computation leads to this fact that there are many computations that one can set up where to know what will happen, you really have to just go through all the steps and see what will happen. You can't kind of jump ahead. Now, a lot of what we've achieved in science and mathematics
Okay, this is such an important point. The point is you cannot predict the future. And a complex system that Yudkowsky himself admits we don't understand how this works. It's so complicated, it's so complex. This is a complex system, and the definition of a complex system is something where when you look at some piece of the system in isolation, you're not able to predict the result of the entire system. Essentially, that's absolutely what a artificial intelligence is. It's a complex system. I mean, humans are complex system themselves, and let alone as some sort of super intelligence, that would be an even more complex system. And the point, in his own terms, what Wolfram is saying is you cannot predict the future. And that is absolutely correct. You cannot. Therefore, you cannot predict what an AI is going to do. So let's just continue listening to what he has to say. But I just wanted to emphasize that's such an important point.
is to find little pockets of computational reducibility that allow us to jump ahead in some place or another. That's what most of our inventions have to do with, taking what is out there in the sort of computationally irreducible world and finding some particular place where we can jump ahead and where we can kind of foresee what's going to happen and make use of those things. So, I mean, I kind of think the first week, there's no way to get out of computational irreducibility. And the,
fundamental limits in nature. There are fundamental limits in nature. Not everything is just like it's so funny that he gave this idea of an asteroid hitting Earth. This is a simple Newtonian motion type thing. This is so simple. The calculations for that is so simple. And that is the kind of thing that you can predict. But what Wolfram is clearly stating, and is absolutely right, and this is an obvious point that everyone should have been able to know in the first place. It doesn't take a genius to make this point, but this meteor hitting Earth is in a different category of predictability than something like what is an AI going to do.
In a sense, then what one's talking about is there are these pockets of reducibility. We find some. There are ones that we humans care about. There are ones that our civilization depends on. There are lots of other pockets of reducibility that we haven't found, many of which we probably don't care about in the current way that we are thinking about things. And, I see it, I don't see it as being this kind of linear, oh, this thing is now smarter than us, so doom, so to speak. I think that it is, and as I say, my own personal experience has been, I'm completely used to the idea that computers are smarter than I am. And, while there's sort of the question of are those computers connected to everything that runs my life, so to speak? That's a different issue. But in terms of the raw experience of, are the computers smarter than I am? Well, I already know that they are. Now, I think the other thing to say is, can the computers get smarter than we are in some sense in every dimension where we humans are used to doing things? That's a different issue. But I think that's a different issue from and then there's the question of sort of what does it mean?
I think what he was going to say if he finished that sentence was, it's a different issue of can you get smarter in all these areas. It's not the same thing as whether AI is going to kill us.
If we live in a world where there's lots of things going on that are sort of smarter than we are in some definition of smartness, well, one point to realize is the natural world is already an example of such a thing. I mean, the natural world is full of computations that go far beyond the computations that we do in our brains. And, how do we manage to coexist with the natural world? Well, we found these particular niches where, it doesn't matter that it rains a lot because we build houses and so on. We found these ways to coexist with the natural world that seem to let us lead the lives we want to lead. There are things we can't do because our physiology, our biology doesn't let us go there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting points here, and I will hope they can really dive into this and unpack this more. But that's really true. There's so much computation going on in the universe. There's so much intelligence, depending on the definition of intelligence, in the universe, and it's not like, so it's not, I think to just say, oh, we have these optimizers that are way more powerful than the human brain, and therefore once something is smarter than us, then it's going to destroy us. That is definitely, I think that already is disproven that that's going to necessarily lead to doom, just by the fact that we are not the most powerful computer in the universe. In fact, you could argue like the entire universe is a computation itself.
But we seem to be able to live contented lives, even though we can't, go to the bottom of the ocean, without, having some complicated, piece of technology and so on. Intelligence of the machine goes from, 150 to 160 to 200 to 300, whatever that might mean. I mean,
Well, I think O3 has I don't know what the IQ is, but it's in the 99.99 percentile or something like that. It did really well on an IQ test, although maybe that's because of the questions were in the training data or something. I don't know.
Galloping through the Raven's progressive matrices at a rapid clip is not, again, from my point of view, it's kind of already happened that there are many things in that, that computation can do that are beyond what I can do with my sort of unaided mind, so to speak. So I'm curious, I mean, do you see the issue as being kind of a more of a, we put the AIs in charge of our, air traffic control and our, medical devices and our this and that and the other. And so at the sort of actuation layer, things.
There's going to be issues. That's absolutely a real concern. That is definitely not what Yudkowsky is arguing, but he didn't really lay out a case in his opening statement. He was just talking about hot dogs and stuff.
A hard time with is the kind of, it feels very anthropomorphic.
I'm joking. He wasn't just talking about hot dogs.
To talk about kind of, the AI wants to do this. The AI is, wants to trade with us or not, or whatever. That, I could talk about the natural world in the same way. Does the weather want to give us a good time or not? I don't even know what that means.
Could I just segue as well? Eliezer, I understood your point as there's a powerful force which is going to push us out of equilibrium. And I think Stephen is making the argument that we are in an equilibrium now. Is that fair?
That didn't sound fair to me.
Okay, so I understood that Stephen was making the argument that there are these countervailing forces that prevent significant deviations.
No, I don't think that's what I was saying. I mean, I'm not claiming that the world won't change. Okay, I'm simply saying the idea that it's kind of, game over because suddenly the IQ crosses 300 or something. I don't believe in that.
I think we probably both agree that IQ 300 is not meaningful.
Right. Okay. I'm not surprised we both agree about that. But no, the point that I'm making is that this idea that somehow the AI gets smart enough to be able to do everything, I don't believe in that. I mean, I think there's this sort of computational irreducibility limit that, great neural net or not, that's just a fundamental kind of formal limit that we don't get around.
So I first want to try to sort of repeat back your summary. And your summary is like, because we cannot predict a thing, it shows we're not smarter than that thing. And even in a sense that it's smart summary of your...
Well, part of it. I mean, the problem with a lot of these things is we get a word like smart, and then we don't, we kind of think we know what it means, but then it kind of slithers around on us. And I think that's, that's part of, but I would say that, what I'm saying is merely that if you say, I want a system that can
one-way hash that and hash something and throw away the key, that nothing at any point in the arbitrarily far future, even if it has consumed entire galaxies, chooses computing power, will ever be able to find the input that you fed to that one-way hash. So in this sense, universal problem solving is probably not on the table, as far as we know, given the present laws of physics. But, the European...
It's nice to hear him acknowledge that they're...
In Europe, fire...
That's true.
A fire doesn't need to be able to burn neon or other noble gases in order to be able to burn.
So again, it's like, okay, yeah, look, an AI could, in theory, do bad things. It could, a super AI could go awry, not do what we want it to, and kill everybody. It's totally possible. That is possible. But is that, and in these AI doomers, they think it's either an inevitability or they have this very high percentage likelihood that that's going to happen. They have this P value, or not a P value, but the probability of doom, P doom. And that is what needs to be argued. We don't know what this is going to do. We don't know what these systems are going to do. So how do we know that there's a high chance that it's going to take us over? We need to just get to this part of the discussion.
Burn you personally. It doesn't have to be universal, and you don't even need to be able to define exactly what fire is to die in a forest fire. People have probably died in fires a long time before they worked out the concept of combustion and chemical rearrangements with oxygen that had ended up in states of lower energy, which released that as kinetic energy, which looks like heat, which is what burns you. People didn't know that, and they still died in forest fires. And I can try to define what's in intelligence. But before I do that, I do want to point out that being unable to define something is not bulletproof armor.
For sure. But I think the question is, it seems like the argument that you're making, which may not be correct, is, I mean, I may not be correctly representing it, is, there will be AI is advancing rapidly. We can talk about, what we know about how AIs work inside and the whole story of computational irreducibility and how it applies to that and why machine learning works. Those are interesting questions. It'd be fun to talk about those. But I think one of the issues is we don't know, just how effective, AIs are going to become. But we do know there is a limit to how effective they can become, because we know that there are, as you say, I wouldn't go as far as talking about, elaborate one-way hashes and things. There are much more straightforward kinds of things that you can't predict except by running the steps.
Particular cellular automata?
Okay, one thing I think that Wolfram is getting wrong here is he seems to not be conceding that it's possible for an AI to kill all humans. I think that is clearly possible. I'm not even saying it's likely that we would necessarily have an AI with that capability, but it is possible. We can talk about the likelihood of that. That's an interesting discussion, but it's certainly possible to think of an AI, even if it's not even super intelligent, just somehow having access to important systems, the nukes or something, and destroying things. And he did mention this. He did mention that this was a potential. I think he acknowledged that this is potentially true, but then at the same time now he's kind of arguing, we're not going to have an AI that's smarter in every category, and so it wouldn't kill us or something. But I mean, just concede that in theory you could. There's not a physical limit on AIs being able to kill people. It's possible, and but again, it's not likely. There's no evidence. There's no reason to think that it is likely to occur.
Yeah, for example.
Sure.
Right.
I think we agree on that. Just to stipulate that part.
Yes, right. So I mean, okay. So then the question is, could it be the case that everything we humans care about can be done faster, better by AIs? Could it be that the things that are important for running the world, and that that there's sort of this, there's a question: could everything that humans do be done better than AIs? That's a different question from whether AIs can sort of do everything, can do things that we have no idea how to do. How to do.
I mean, even if there's one last remaining computational task that a human brain can do better than an AI by predicting the exact output of that particular brain, which you're sure not going to get without doing a bunch of intervening steps if you want it down very exactly, that is not necessarily protective against a bullet, right?
Sure.
There were problems that the Native Americans could solve better than the Europeans who wiped them out. Absolutely.
There will be, just as, for example, the weather has ways to wipe us out. It's in any particular, I don't know, you can imagine some mega super storm that we don't completely understand, that because we're talking about, again, things we don't completely understand. So I think we can as well say we don't know what's possible.
Storms have coexisted with humans. Humans have not been able to predict storms, and I think this is a really good point. Although I can see how maybe a lot of people wouldn't benefit from this analogy. It's not really illustrating a point. It's kind of a technical semantic.
Terrible thing that can happen. People imagine with respect to climate that's going to wipe us out. Another thing that involves sort of lots of extrapolation about what's going to happen.
I mean, you can kill a lot of people without killing everyone. It is much harder for the weather to wipe out every last human on the face of the earth than it is for the weather to just kill a lot of people.
Fair enough.
And I think that total extermination is much worse than just a lot of people dying, because you also lose posterity. You lose the meaning of history.
Right. Okay, so we could segue to a quite different topic, which is, in the history of life on Earth, there have been plenty of times when, if we were two stegosauruses talking about this, 100 million years ago, whenever stegosauruses were around, the stegosauruses would say, gosh, it would be terrible if we were wiped out. And if those pesky mammals that have just the one or two things that they can do better than us took over. And I'm curious about, your view of the ethics of that situation relative to...
This is a very different line of reasoning from let us define intelligence, the work done of prediction, the work done of steering. What does it mean to want something? Does a chess game does an AI chess player want to win chess? Well, it's definitely very good at winning chess, whether you say it wants to or not. Does it want to?
Oh, I hope you start talking about chess. I think Yudkowsky's arguments fall apart when he starts talking about chess. But I really hope we don't talk about philosophy and history. This is all dumb.
Protect its pawns. I just want to remark on all of the places we could have maybe gone to and temporarily bookmark
for a little while longer, and we'll come back to the Stegosauruses later.
Oh, we'll come back to the Stegosauruses later. Okay, I'm up for that.
Unless you have some quick comment about the Stegosauruses.
Very broadly, that the trouble with looking at the change from Stegosauruses to humans and determining and viewing a trend of things getting better and better and turning out pretty much okay is that as humans, we're drawing an arrow around the target. If we got wiped out and replaced by Stegosauruses, and the Stegosauruses had, didn't care about each other very much. They grew up in different evolutionary social circumstances. If we were wiped out and replaced by insects, maybe the hives of sapient insects just never care very much about other hives. They just don't they don't end up caring very much about sapient life at all. That would be a grand tragedy. It's not at all clear to me that you can wipe out humanity and replace it by arbitrary stuff and everything just gets better as a result.
I don't know what better means. I mean, better is a very human concept.
Well, that's the whole... there you have it. And yet, if we're going sapient ants...
I think it's not a question necessarily better. It's like we're humans and we're happy to be around and we kind of want us to continue because that's, we're kind of the in-charge critters around here. And it's kind of like that's, let's stay in charge. Why would we give it up to something? And we might have some argument that, of course, these other ones that we might give it up to are worse than us. But, in the end, it's like we're here and we kind of like being here. So we'd like that to continue, I think, at least.
That's not what I'm fighting for. I want there to be sapient life that cares about other sapient life, that doesn't just discover things about the universe, but appreciates those discoveries, that looks out at the universe with wonder and curiosity rather than mere expected value calculations. I want it to have fun. I want it to be conscious. I'm worried that these things get lost. And if you say that, if you want life to be conscious, if you want there to be consciousness in the humans...
Let me summarize. We don't want all the people to die. Everyone agrees. That's all there is to this. This is not an interesting line of discussion.
Consciousness in the universe. That's just your preference, Eliezer. Then we might need to have a long conversation about what alternate state of meta-ethical affairs you thought might have obtained other than that, to be disappointed at the absence of or to critique the absence of. But mostly I'm like, yeah, I'm the one who says I'd rather the universe be filled with consciousness than mostly unconscious. And, I'll own that.
This whole question about, consciousness, it's like, I'm pretty sure that I have some consciousness. I have this, thread of experience. I'm experiencing things. As far as I'm concerned, you're a bunch of pixels on the screen. I have no idea, what's going on. Kind of from experience, believe is that I'm conscious. And, when it comes to even an AI, is this thing, quotes, conscious, or is it merely a bag of bits? I mean, in other words, and, with an AI, we can, with some effort, go and look at all the bags of bits. With human brains, we can't yet do that. Presumably, eventually, we will be able to do that. And once I can see all those neuron firings in your brain, how will I think about the consciousness in your brain? And how do I even know what's going on beyond from what I can experience inside myself?
Well, I infer that you're conscious based on knowing that I'm conscious and thinking great-grandparents We are built on like basically the same engine plan. I haven't actually administered an MRI to you, but I would guess that you've got like pretty much the same of the brain are similar algorithm, you know, based on you claiming to me that you're conscious and all that.
Right. I mean, it's an extrapolation.
Okay, so maybe let me just inject some more interesting thoughts here based off of this discussion. So, how do you know that other people, how do you have a theory of mind? How do you know that other people think like you? Well, there's two reasons. One of them, I just wanted to preface with this reason, is that this is instinct. So this is not even really something that you need to learn at some point. This is something that is very deeply ingrained into our psyche. And there's different types of knowledge and different types of experiences that we can have. Some are something where I can just tell you 1 + 1 = 2. And although you make addition, I could teach you how addition works or something. I mean, again, that's a very natural concept, but you get what I'm trying to say. This is something that you would learn. And then there's emotions and facial expressions, and you pick up on language without being taught what a language is. And so there's certain things that are built in to our brains. Now, that is not... that does not mean that it's not knowledge. It doesn't mean that it's not something that you have learned. It's just something that was kind of preloaded, so to speak, into your mind and body. It was the knowledge that you started with. And then the other stuff is knowledge that you accumulated. And there may be different systems in the brain for this, but that's an implementation detail. So first of all, this is knowledge and it's instinctual. But how do you know it? Like, let's pretend we were scientists that were aliens and just had no conception. Commonalities, maybe you would do MRIs, as he's talking about, looking at that everyone has the same types of things in their brain. And also you would probably, since this is more relevant to the discussion, actually try to explore what their experience is like and try to prod and talk to these systems to understand. I mean, not these systems, these people. To them, it's like kind of like a system. You would talk to these people and try to figure out what their experience is like in their head, and then through that, you would form you would gather that evidence, and at some point, you would have a body of evidence that is suggestive, using the scientific method, that people have a similar functioning mind, and you could then develop a theory of mind from that. So this is not something that's self-evident. This is something that is experimentally evident. And the way that we have this instinctually embedded into our psyche is because this is how we evolved. And those that developed the theory of mind, basically, this was like a test. This is like a scientific experiment. Like each iteration of each generation, a new person was born, or a proto-human was born. This animal would either have some degree of an inbuilt understanding of other people's psyches, and they would have a theory of mind. And those that had a stronger and more accurate theory of mind, a human out there guess a theory of mind and see if it works, and the other one would be, I mean, we don't know what other scientific methods these aliens that can be deduced. And I'm not claiming that either of these guys are saying you can deduce theory of mind. But the fact that we have a theory of mind and we understand this conscious experience, and that different people are having a conscious experience, and we can assume that that's true, that's not something that's you can logically deduce. This is something that must be experimentally deduced. Why? Why can't we logically deduce it? I'll tell you. Because this is a complex system. Our brains are complex, our bodies are complex, and that's where cognition occurs. So we cannot predict it. We cannot just look at the cells and just be thinking, oh, obviously there's going to be consciousness and these are going to be the factors in the brain. We have to observe the evidence of how humans behave and what humans do and what their experience is like. And I hope we can talk about chess, because one thing I want to get into more at that time is talking about we do not know logically, we cannot deduce that an AI is going to win at chess. even though we know alpha, what's it called? There's not a deep mind chess bot, but the Stockfish is the good one. I know the name Stockfish. We know Stockfish is going to beat Magnus. Stockfish has a super high elo. It can beat anybody. It's really good. Not chess. Way better than humans. But we didn't know that prior to testing it. And we didn't even, and now maybe you could say we could make, a chess algorithm using existing methods, and we would know that it's better than humans before even testing it. That's possibly true. You wouldn't know for sure, but you'd be pretty positive that it would be. But that would be because we already have the evidence that these methods work. So the point is when we were building the chess AI in the first place, we didn't know that any given model would be better than humans. Maybe we thought it was possible for models to be better than humans, but we didn't know until we actually got the result that an AI could beat humans. And now we have so much evidence that these AIs are very good because they play against all the top players and they beat them. And so that was something we didn't know the behavior of these AIs until we experimentally tested them. And the reason is because we cannot predict what they're going to do. We can look inside the neural network. We can see, maybe this neuron corresponds to the Eiffel Tower or something like that. We can do these little experimental things and understand a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of what's going on, but we don't know what these systems are going to do. As Yudkowsky said himself, we do not understand, and we cannot deduce what they're going to do without running the scientific method. And the scientific method is the method by which we understand the behavior that emerges in complex systems. And we can inspect the bits that go into a neural network, but there's too many of them. We just don't know what they do under all circumstances. So we cannot predict the behavior of an AI, even a dumb AI. We cannot predict it. And as a result of that, we don't know what it's going to do. We don't know that it's going to kill us. We need evidence, and you can't deduce it. You cannot deduce it. It cannot be deduced. Okay, let's keep watching.
Similar design.
Right. It's a reasonable, piece of scientific induction extrapolation. But what I'm curious about is, so where's the boundary?
So it's not so much that I'm worried that machines cannot be conscious as I'm worried that the particular uncontrolled superintelligences we end up making are not going to value consciousness all that much, which means that they're not going to produce very much of it. Then the little bits of consciousness that are supervising the paperclip making algorithms are, not going to be as much consciousness as we could have made of the universe. And if they don't value fun, they're probably not having fun either. They're just being efficient because they didn't end up valuing fun. That's the general class of nightmare scenario that I'm worried about.
I mean, I really wonder, my computer, when it runs and does all these searches and it finds these cool, cellular automaton patterns or whatever else, I wonder if it's having fun. I bet
it 99 to 1 against. I don't know everything that there is to know about this, but it seems to be that when I stare at the machinery of having fun, there are gears and wheels there that are not built into a pocket calculator, that are not built into a simple Python program searching through a list of cellular automata. Like,
I wouldn't
stuff
use a Python
happens.
program. That's very low level.
I think if there could be doing this research, it would be interesting to look at the neurotransmitters in the brain and how there's different levels of things like dopamine and serotonin and how this drives behavior and mood and fun and all these things. And maybe, AIs of the future are going to have these different kinds of levers that are adjusted based off of perception, and they're going to try to optimize and balance out the levels of it might be optimizing across different things that are actually analogous to these neurotransmitters. So like kind of if you maybe this is just basically like I'm just spitballing here, but perhaps think about O3. O3 is like a train of thought. So it goes and it takes an LLM, which can produce some great content and great thinking, and then it strategically deploys that. But how is it planning this out. It's just kind of planning this out by running an LLM and thinking, what should I think? And then it's going through each of those thoughts, and then it's generating more things for each thoughts and creating evaluations and following a plan and doing something along those lines. Well, there may be, I know that people are working on more optimizations on that process, and maybe, long story short, that might end up representing something that is similar to the human brain. And there might be analogous concepts that emerge that are similar to neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. But who knows?
Sometimes things like sort of people say, the one thread, the one sort of shred that we have that machines will never have is some kind of emotional response to things, which, I think that's a very weak concept, because I think emotions are a very chemically based kind of thing that's actually very coarse compared to a lot of.
Yeah, but there are things that can direct a machine's attention. So like an AI can have a chain of thought, and then at some point it can perceive something either within that chain of thought, or maybe if there's external input also being put in at the same time. It can then use that and get super motivated to drive in on that topic. Now, if it had such a behavior, that would be similar to a mechanism of dopamine, because dopamine focuses and pushes your attention. I mean, there's also some, and there is some extent to which it's like a very motivating force. So when you're going towards a goal, you're getting a boost of dopamine, and actually when you reach the goal, I believe the dopamine goes down. So if an AI has a chain of thought, it has a chain of thought, and then it goes in on that chain of thought in some particular direction. If there's some element, if there's any sort of optimization process that modulates the direction or the degree to which it perceives it should go into that direction, that's equivalent to dopamine, essentially. And I don't know all the roles of the neurotransmitters. This is a really interesting thing. There's an extent to which you could even argue that this is already embedded. There's like a dopamine-like behavior that's already probably embedded in chain of thought systems. It could be like a more explicit architecture in the future.
The other things that go on in brains.
Yeah, it's not that I think that machines can't have emotions. I suspect that Claude 3.5.1 Sonnet or GPT 01, if they have anything resembling emotions, they're not our emotions. There's like something inside it that was trained to imitate emotions, but if it has emotions, my guess, nobody knows, is that they would be more appropriate to like carrying out the job of being the actor who plays the part of a human who has emotions, and not actually the human emotions themselves. And it's not fundamental to transistors. It's just like what I would guess would happen given the particular way we put these transistors together.
So what you value in the universe and in humanity is a certain set of attributes that have to do with the ability to have fun, the meaning of consciousness and so on. And it is, as I'm understanding it, you think those are sort of the most valuable things that maybe we as a civilization, we as a species have produced. And you think it is our responsibility, if I'm understanding correctly, you think it's our responsibility to kind of preserve these things in the universe. Is that a fair assessment?
I could quibble with the exact wordings, but sure. The light of consciousness, the light of fun, the light of caring, to preserve these things into the galaxies is the most important thing we have to do.
Yeah, so I agree with Yudkowsky here. Who cares? Like, sure, let's just move on. This is not related to risk or doom. And it could be, but let's tie it in. And I don't agree with what exactly he just said, but whatever.
Because you feel that's sort of our big achievement, and it's kind of like it's now our responsibility to, I don't know.
We got handed these things on a silver platter, but that, like maybe a kind of rusty iron platter that we had to shine and clean up a whole lot, but, still on a platter from natural selection and even from cultural processes of development that nobody really saw coming at the time. There were, few people did them on purpose. Somebody did at some point say of slavery, it is time that some person should see these calamities to their end. Not all moral progress was accidental. But, still, like our basic situation of being humanity, of being here on this planet, of having the opportunity to colonize the galaxy, we fought for this a little bit, but it was ultimately handed to us on a platter. And I don't say that it's like written down on a stone tablet anywhere in the universe or laws of physics that we must bring this to the galaxy. I just say, I want to do it. That's what I think is the right thing to do.
Okay. So, I mean, this is, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but it's worth understanding that this is a feeling that you have. This is not something where, as you say, there's...
Okay, what? Stephen, you can destroy his argument. Just have the debate. Who cares why? Is AI going to kill all the humans? Yes or no? Let's talk about this. I mean, you don't necessarily disagree with him that it shouldn't? Okay, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't necessarily agree either. Maybe there's some way you can think about it where perhaps it's like, they're humanoids and not humans. And what's the difference as you evolve and use more technology? What if, your brain is actually made out of silicon? Is that still a human? We can go there, but whatever. Let's talk about this. This is such a weak argument, but we're not even talking about it. We're getting caught in the weeds. And we're just talking about consciousness and hot dogs and stegosauruses and I know Stephen Wolfram has he can destroy this argument. I just want to see it happen. I guess there's still over 3 hours of debate left, so I'm sure they're going to get to it. But I don't like philosophy, and I don't like talking about ancient history and stuff unless it's relevant.
There's no law of physics that says this is the destiny of the universe or anything. This is on this particular planet through this particular process of natural selection of biology and culture and so on. We got to this point. We're really proud of this. Let's try and preserve it. I mean, the
fact that I want to steer the universe there isn't a fact about the whole universe. It's mostly a fact about me.
Sure.
And a whole lot of other people, to be clear.
But, right.
This is not like 2 + 2 = 4. This is not, like water is 2 hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom. This is, where I steer the universe being the sort of thing that I am.
I agree with you. I think one of the things to realize is that if you just let raw computation do what it can do, much of what it will do are things that we humans just don't care about. Just like a lot of what happens in nature are things that we humans don't care about. We've never managed to, sort of take those things from nature and make them into technology, have those things be things that we appreciate as beautiful or whatever else. They're just random things that happen in nature that we don't particularly care about. And most of what a computational system could do is things that are, away from the things that we care about in kind of the computational universe.
This is a great point. So, for example, over in my backyard, there's a piece of wood somewhere and it's decaying, or there's a rock and it's eroding. Nobody cares. That's not an important thing, but that's a physical process. There's energy and computation being applied in that process. And I just don't care about it. But that's what the earth is doing. The earth. That's what nature is doing. And so, again, I do see how this sounds a little weird and maybe it's not, this isn't like a slam dunk argument where people just kind of hear this and think, oh yeah, obviously we have nothing to worry about with AI doom. It is still a bit of a semantic, kind of getting into the weeds in the semantics, but it's a good point. Most of the stuff that happens in the universe is stuff that we don't care about. We care about a very small subsection of things. And there's so much to do that would not be something that humans care about. So presumably, let's say you had a random computer. It just does something randomly. It's not AI. It's just it does random things. It really wouldn't matter, most likely, what it does. Now, it's possible that randomly it could generate the code to hack all the computers in the world and take down the global infrastructure and launch all the nukes and kill everyone. That's possible, but it's very unlikely that, like, if you have enough monkeys typing on a typewriter, one of them will eventually type the Bible. That's one of these common sayings. That's true, right? Eventually, if there's infinite amount of monkeys, infinite amount of time, eventually that string of text on a typewriter would be written. But is that likely? No. We most likely don't care about what the monkeys are writing. We most likely don't care about what a random code generator is going to generate. It's just not going to, it's going to do something, but there's a lot to do. There's so much that can be done in the world, in the physical world, and in a computer that people don't care about. So what are the odds that a process that's just doing things completely orthogonally to human consciousness is going to do something that we care about? Like, it might be like, rearranging molecules or doing some weird stuff somewhere, somehow, but why is that going to necessarily interfere with what humans want? A random generation, I could code a random, I could make a piece of software that runs arbitrary, random instructions on my computer. And in theory, that could hack the entire world and destroy everything. But most likely it won't. And I would argue that the difference between that and the difference between a superintelligence is not actually, what we would do, let's say we were doing an experiment. What is a superintelligence going to do? The baseline of this experiment would be a random action, and we would try and extract signal from that random noise to say, look, it tends to have these behaviors. The baseline is randomness because we don't predict it, and we just have to assume that if we are to say that it does something, that's going to be a non-random occurrence that has a statistical significance. So therefore, it really is, you really have to compare it to essentially a random algorithm. And then you need to bring, as the person claiming it's going to kill everybody, because we know that the odds of a random algorithm killing everybody is very low. You as the doom person need to show how the behavior of tell you that now, but let's continue watching.
Now so many of those things are just things that will just happen, just like they happen in nature. We will kind of shrug our shoulders and say, okay, that's a thing. A lot of what probably happens inside neural nets right now are things where, in fact, I have pretty good evidence of this. They're things which are sort of complicated computational processes where they don't really produce anything that is something that we can recognize or that we care about. They're just things that are happening computationally. And so I think that your concern is that some of those things that might happen or that the AIs might do might be things that collide with what you see as being our sort of responsibility and what is, what AIs, computational systems, whatever, can do, and the thing that you think we as humans sort of have most proudly produced. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, if that works out to they kill us and then go on to do nothing very much interesting or worthwhile with the galaxies that they colonize. Is that also a fair way of describing?
No, that's not a fair way. But so to be clear, Yudkowsky is saying that AI is going to kill us. Wolfram, I don't know why I keep calling him Stephen and Yudkowsky his last name, Eliezer Yudkowsky, Stephen Wolfram. Wolfram is claiming that it's going to do a bunch of things and we're not going to care what it's going to do. It's going to be just something that it has its own ideas of what it wants to do. It's going to do those things, and it's not going to be of any import to us. Usually, there's no, it probably won't really even have anything to do with us if it's truly just off on another level, just doing whatever it wants to do. It's not aligned with humans. And Yudkowsky is saying, it's definitely going to kill everybody. And he hasn't explained why it's definitely going to kill everybody.
Being all of that.
Well, I don't know. I think that, this question of, okay, there are several different pieces to this. I think look, the first question is the practical question. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, will we be able to have this conversation anymore? Or will we be, will we be dead, replaced by bits that are doing what you might think of as meaningless things, but bits, will it be the case that it's as if an asteroid had hit the Earth and all life was wiped out or whatever else? That, that's
if an asteroid hits Earth, all the atoms in it go on doing their little atomic things. The little electron cloud, I want to say circles the nucleus, but of course it doesn't really, blah, blah, quantum. But, the thing that quantum physicists describe to the lay audiences as, circling the electron circling the nucleus. It goes on doing that. Maybe some amount of fusion occurs if an asteroid hits hard enough, some amount of fission and fusion. But, by and large, the atoms go on doing their atomic things, but they're not morally valent things. They're not important things. They're not worthwhile things. The Earth, the universe gets a little darker every time a bullet gets fired into somebody's head or they die of old age, even though the atoms are still doing their atom things.
Right. Okay. So this is, I mean, to me, that's a curiously, viscerally, I agree with you. Scientifically, I have a bit of a hard time. In a sense that feels like a very kind of spiritual kind of statement, which is not necessarily bad, but it's just worth understanding.
This is so weird. I don't know why he's going on this. He's going on this route of argumentation about not wanting everyone to die. Like, it's just not necessary. I don't know what to say.
What kind of a thing it is. It is saying that there's something very kind of sacred about these attributes of humans, and that we have perhaps even a higher purpose. But there's a much more practical thing. As humans who like doing what we're doing, it would be nice if we could go on doing that without all being killed by AIs. So I don't
see any distinction between these. There's nothing more scientific about saying, I'm a human, I'd like to keep on doing what I'm doing. And I'm a human, I'd like to fill the universe with the light of consciousness, even if that consciousness isn't human, so long as it cares and is having fun.
I agree. Those are both statements. It's like, ethics is not a scientific field. It's about how we humans feel about things, and we humans could feel this way, we could feel that way. It's to do with the nature of us as humans, and we could scientize those statements by saying, let's do an fMRI and notice, why do you say that? Oh, your such and such lobe lights up. But I don't think that's a particularly useful thing to say. I think it should happen or not happen, whatever else. But I guess that there's one question is, what's the right thing to have happen? I don't think there's any abstract way to answer that. I think it's a question of how we humans feel about it. And I think you and I seem to feel, I know I feel, that, preserving kind of what humans do is a good thing.
I think that in terms of prospects of human existence I'd like to preserve, I would not include mosquitoes. Can just get rid of all the mosquitoes. I think the planet would be fine. I think we'd be fine. I would, if I could, get rid of this whole aging business that humans do. This was more controversial. It would actually change things if that happened. And some of the changes might not even be positive, but my guess is that they would be quite positive on net. And I'd be in favor of, if this were a thing you could do with a limited AI that wasn't going to wipe out humanity, and you could know that, and you weren't taking any extra risk by doing that, I'd say, use AlphaFold 5 to solve as many aging-related problems as you can. And some people would hate that. And there's the question of, is one of us making a mistake? Is it the case that if you take me and the person who wants to preserve aging, who wants humans to keep getting older and die, that you put us both opposite each other, and one at a time, you just tell us all the facts about the way the universe actually is. You just expose us to all the arguments that exist to be considered about this, that any moral philosopher could invent in, some sort of random order. Do we converge, or do we just want different things? And it's not clear to me that this is an instance of conflict versus mistake. It could be that the people who believe that aging ought to be preserved forever, that there are things you could tell them about what would happen if we cured aging that would change their minds. It could be that they're show me some like dystopian world of 300 years in the future, which is like just being ruled by Vladimir Putin forever and ever, and nobody's having fun. And I could be like, yeah, okay, that was worse. So it's not clear to me that we need to say that they and I care about different things. We might, but it's not sure. We haven't actually run the experiment of telling us both all the...
So part of what you're saying is when things are matters of sort of human decision, different humans might come to different decisions. And it's not clear how one resolves that. I mean, insofar as perhaps one of the things you're saying is when they're building super killer viruses that can wipe out the species, assume a small number of humans say that potentially sort of even though they say we really have good reasons to do this, and other people say that's a really bad idea, in most cases, you'll just end up with two different points of view, but you're, I think, arguing that there are cases in which you kind of have to, the world has to align on one particular thing. Because, as soon as there's one super killer virus that wipes the species out, it's game over, so to speak.
I mean, I think that's a bit of a topic change, but yes, in the entirely different realm of political rather than moral philosophy, I would agree that either your species is able to prevent anybody from making a super virus that kills everyone or at least collapses civilization, or your civilization does not last. And I think that even many of my fellow libertarians would agree that, making and releasing super viruses ought not to be legal, that this is a proper thing for government to do, to, ban the releasing of extremely lethal engineered super viruses.
But so, as I'm understanding it, you think that the same thing is basically true about powerful AIs.
Yep. I think that we're in a situation where if anyone builds a superintelligence, everyone everywhere dies.
Okay, let's talk about it. Let's get to the argument for this. It looks like there's a new chapter here. Let's see. Existential risk. Consciousness and personal identity in brain emulation. Oh my gosh, this is so boring. Most replayed. Wait, what? Most replayed. Okay. Weird. AI persuasion. I'm just looking through this because I feel like they're not talking about important things. Prediction versus agency. Some of these things are interesting. Okay, this gets good here. Oh yeah, wonderful. Okay, it gets good. So after 2.5 hours, they start talking about interesting topics. Let's see. Okay, that actually looks pretty interesting. I'm just trying to decide, should I skip ahead? Okay, we'll just keep watching.
And I think that is a sort of thing that government, where it's a proper use of government to try to have that not happen. I would sooner abandon my political philosophy than commit planetary suicide about it.
So you really do see those as sort of comparable things. The super virus, the superintelligence, these are both things that you think are things that are sort of comparable risks that,
I don't want to put this on 2x speed because even though I think that they're talking about things that are not very interesting, because I think people like to listen at 2x speed, because I'm not talking at 2x speed, and I don't want people to have to adjust. So what I'm going to do is, for the time being, I'm going to just put this less interesting part on 1.2 0.25 speed. So you'll still be able to understand it. If you're listening faster, this is just going to be slightly faster than it otherwise would. It shouldn't be too big of a deal. But I want to get through this part quickly.
Actually, I wanted to come back to this question about immortality, because I'm big on immortality as well. I think we're both interested in cryonics. I remember talking to you about that years and years ago. It's kind of shocking that cryonics hasn't worked yet. Maybe that's one of the tests of the next generation of AIs is can the AIs solve the problem of how to get water to cool down without expanding, so to speak. But I'm just sort of curious from your sort of moral compass point of view, if immortality is a backup AI, maybe you gradually, your brain fails for some kind of fun-preserving outcome, or whether you think of that as being a kind of a fun-destroying outcome, so to speak.
I think that there's a whole lot of work to be done in making sure that you are getting all of the functionally relevant properties of every neuron in the brain that you scan, up to whatever is just like random thermal noise. And then as long as you've done that work, sure, sign me right up. You don't even need to do it over 20 years or something. Like, you can do it over a day. You can knock me out, scan through my entire brain destructively, and wake me up when it's over, as long as you have actually gotten every single functionally relevant property of every neuron, and and you are able to simulate them correctly. If I trust a superintelligence to do this, I'll say sign me right up. If it's like some kind of shady back alley human doctor, I might have a lot more qualms.
But so you think in that situation where you've been fully scanned and reproduced digitally, when the digital copy is switched on, it's you waking up.
Yep.
But it's true. Can you trust the AI? What if the AI injects something undetectably into your psyche? A backdoor. Ooh.
Connection with the past you as your memory anyway, and in that case you would have that memory. Is that right?
No, it's because I think that I am like the functional properties of my neurons that I can see from inside. Like, if one of the electrons somewhere inside my brain was secretly a different flavor of electron, never mind how hard this breaks all of physics, but if it was like secretly a different flavor of electron that otherwise behaved exactly like all the other electrons, except for not being, like quantum interchangeable, so exclusion principle doesn't apply to it, but otherwise it's just like exactly functionally the same. I can't tell. I can't see that. If you swim up to one of my neurons, and while it's otherwise not firing, replace it with a robotic analog that behaves in exactly the same way, I can't see that. I can't tell that anything has happened. It doesn't.
I mean, you don't even need to go this far. You can just remove some person's brain tissue or something, or inject something in their brain, etc. People do this all the time, put electrodes in the brain that alter things. You're still the same person. So I'm not even sure that this holds up. It's not, I mean, it depends on kind of what the point he's getting at. It's that you don't have to have something be an exact copy to be the same person. I mean, you can remove part of someone's brain. They've done this, and they're the same person. It's sometimes it alters them in a perceivable way, and sometimes it doesn't. You can, put look at Neuralink, right? You're putting electrodes in the brain, and this technology has gone way back. There's all kinds of examples of that. And it alters the function of the brain. You're still the same person. But yeah, I mean, I do agree. If you're replacing that neuron with a mechanical neuron, I mean, you know what I mean, an analog, not mechanical, whatever. You're replacing it with an analog to a neuron. Yeah, I agree. You're the same person. But I think even if it's more fuzzy than that, you can do a lot of damage, and it's still the same person. But I'm not sure that I agree necessarily that the uploaded version is the same as the biological version. That's interesting. I don't really care that much. I don't think it's like an important discussion to have. We're not close to this being a relevant thing, but just on a conceptual level. There's instantiations of the same object. So, it may be you on some level, but then it's a different instantiation of you. And of course, there's divergence of that. So, you can, between, like, as the AI goes forward and as you go forward, now no longer it's the same person. So it's not exactly you. So it depends on how you want to think about it. But anyway, I don't think this is very important. Sorry for being negative about this debate. I'm just excited to get to the good part. That's all.
It affect me.
Well, so this, though, comes to the essence of what the you is, because, and this also relates to current AIs. One of the big surprises with something like ChatGPT was that it could be human enough to be able to write somewhat credible essays. It wasn't obvious that that was possible. It could have been the case that to reproduce human language required some new physics in the brain of, quantum gravity in the brain or some such other thing that it's just completely out of reach to our kind of sort of current computational techniques. But in fact, it seems that we were able to capture enough that we can have it write sort of somewhat human-sounding essays. So the question...
That's true. It was not clear at what point it would be possible to do ChatGPT. And yeah, people had all these theories about that it would not be possible with classical computers. It would just be something that we couldn't scale to, or we wouldn't be able to, because maybe it had a quantum component to. There's some element of the creative with computers, but basically something about what's going on in quantum processes. And so if you were going to simulate that with a classical computer, it would, just to do a small computation would be far, even just something that's way less than what it would take to simulate consciousness. Just a small basic quantum computation would be far too difficult for supercomputers to do. So it would basically be inconceivable that with current computational technology, we would be able to make something as powerful as ChatGPT. Now that ended up being wrong, very wrong. It would actually ended up being quite easy. I mean, it's a large amount of compute for sure, but we're scaling up way past that now. And so, that was a really interesting discovery that we made.
Would be, when we reproduce your brain, do we have to reproduce it only functionally, or do we have to reproduce it with every glial cell, represented with all of its chemistry and so on?
I think you need to reproduce the functionally relevant properties of every glial cell. If you're doing something to glial cells where I would notice, where there'd be like a detectable subjective change, if you could give me a questionnaire and I'd answer differently on the questionnaire afterwards, like if you are changing all of the glial cells in that fashion.
Okay, so basically it's to have the same predictive power, then it doesn't matter about the internal structure as long as it has the same, it's like an equivalent function, essentially, is what he's saying.
You have perhaps killed me.
Okay. So what you're saying is, if you can behave to the outside world like answer questionnaires the same way, then you are adequately the same.
No, it's about what I can tell internally, not externally. If you find a sufficiently smart actor, an actor who is enough smarter than I am, they can maybe play my part in a way that fools even my closest friends. But that is not me. And the actor knows they're not me. They can tell internally, even if they're managing to mimic me externally.
Okay, but like somebody could just run an experiment and give you the same questionnaire externally. That's equivalent. It's not about tricking people.
So, I mean, for example, if I value my brain too much to take drugs of any kind. But, if I didn't have quite that point of view, I might.
I wonder if Stephen drinks coffee or smokes or anything. Not trying to doubt him here. I'm just like genuinely curious.
Might feed in molecules of some crazy psychedelic thing, and then my brain is. So am I still me when I've done that? I've changed my brain chemistry by putting in some strange drug. Does that de-me me, so to speak?
There we start to get into the edge cases where I start to feel more uncertain in my answers. I would feel very nervous about taking an uploading procedure, about going through an uploading
drug. It's still,
there's some sufficiently, there's sort of like two different questions here. One is something like, what do you see happen to you from the inside? Do you experience dying, or do you experience a change from one person into another? I'm not even entirely sure that this is the right question to ask, but it's a different question of, do I care? You can, there's plausibly some sufficiently advanced pill you could feed me that would, produce changes to neurochemistry where I just stopped caring about other people at all. And maybe I experience ending up in that person. Maybe I experience ending up as that person, but I still wouldn't want it. And
well, you wouldn't beforehand. You wouldn't want it. I mean, this is another complicated thing, because once you're in that consciousness, it's kind of like saying, we say, right meaningful, but we might think that was meaningful. Back in, we might think, back in the day, people might have thought Maybe some do now. If you're not growing your own food, you're not leading a real life, so to speak. Or if you're not,
The reason why I don't particularly like philosophy is because it's just, it ends up being people come up with all these ideas, and it almost always is just not very useful. And so there's been, like, for example, just like this idea about what is consciousness and in human intelligence, and people have said things about quantum. There must be some kind of quantum process there, and people have put forth these types of ideas, and it just ended up to not be true. And even if it was true, because I just don't really like it, and I like that, but just like this, and people have observing something, thinking about it, and like, whatever, nature is made out of 4 elements, and this, and everything is water, and just people they just say all this stuff, and it's like, what is the point of that? That's I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can say. We can talk about how we should live our lives. We can talk about abstract concepts. We can appreciate aesthetics and all these things, but just the general body of just think these people lack perspective of what we now know about the physical world and mental models that we can develop of things that, like, basically there are ideas that have been introduced in much later than a lot of these great philosophers have done work. And I think that these ideas are just so much better. And I'm sure that over time, any theory, any philosophical theory that you come up with will then be displaced by better understanding. And I just don't see what value it adds. I mean, like, think about how philosophers are, say, like, whoever was stupid. Like, what's the point of that? How does that help you? Like, why are you thinking about this stuff? This is like, literally, you just made that shit up. And so anyway, but I don't think it's constructive when I really want to just get to the meat of this debate.
Sort of fighting for the greater glory of God. You're not leading a real life, for example. And, if we project to the future, let's say that, the uploading thing works. And in the end, sort of all human consciousnesses can be in a box. And to us today, it might appear that those human consciousnesses...
And you've put them all into a box, and they're all playing video games,
Right. But the point I was going to make was actually a slightly different one, which was, to us today, to you and I probably, certainly me today, the future of it's a trillion souls in a box playing virtual video games seems like a terrible outcome. Seems like that's the end of history. That's everything is destroyed. That's your kind of bad case scenario of, which might be forced by AIs, or it might just happen because the humans decide they...
His kind of bad case scenario is everyone dies.
Want to be immortal, as uploaded consciousnesses.
I mean,
to us today, that looks like a really, really bad outcome. But it
could be worse. I mean, I definitely have friends who think that if you tile all the galaxies within reach with, people in boxes, but they're having fun in there and playing video games in solitary, okay, I start to get the Wiggins, but, maybe that's still like 10% of all the value you could have gotten. And if they're playing video games with each other and there's like real people that they're interacting with and they care about those other people, maybe that's like 50% of all the value. I don't quite want to say that this is not the level of sterile universe that I am expecting and scared of.
Okay, but let's just take, to us today, it doesn't seem like a good outcome for humanity to have a bunch of uploaded. Maybe you don't agree.
It's not the best outcome, and why go for anything but the best? Fine. Why settle for less?
Fair enough. But what I'd like to argue is, to one of those consciousnesses, if you say, "Are you leading a fulfilled existence?" Those consciousnesses might feel that they are living a fulfilled existence. Just like in the past, somebody might have said, I lead a fulfilled existence if I die at the age of 20 as, leading the good fight on behalf of, this or that, religious belief or whatever else, right? That is then I am achieving my ultimate purpose, so to speak. It's bad to be just in a box as a virtualized, playing virtualized video games. But I would claim that at that moment, just like the human who took the drugs, who feels at that moment that they're doing the right thing, that at that moment, those virtualized humans will feel like they're doing something fulfilled.
So when you've got two people who are making different choices and doing different things, the question of do they have a conflict, or is at least one of them mistaken? Like, to me, that revolves around the question of, are there true facts you can tell them? Are there arguments, is there a series of arguments you can present to them within their current framework, which, changes that framework in a kind of normal way and not by directly hacking their brain or whatever? If you can get from point A to point B by being told true things, then there exists a standpoint from which to say B was correct, A was wrong, but they were within the same framework. They were within a commensurate framework. If you've got someone who's content to just farm and never know anything more than that, take them up on a high mountain and show them all the nations of the world and all the cuisines they've never tasted and all the books that people are reading and all the activities they're engaging in that they've never heard of before. And then if they still want to go back to the farm, maybe they were, kind of just corrected that they were okay with this farming thing.
I have to say, I've seen that as a very practical thing because I've been curious. I'm a great believer in sort of talent all over the world in all kinds of places and so on. And I've been interested, particularly in kids and so on, of you go visit some rural high school in the US, for example, and you explain about all these amazing things about science and technology and so on. And, some kids really care, but a lot just don't care. It's just not part of their. And then the question is, to what extent are you then serving as kind of a missionary saying you really, really should care? This is really as opposed to just saying, sorry, you don't care, so move on type thing.
Well, if you can control superintelligences, the thing you want to do is build a model of the person that isn't self-conscious inside the superintelligence and ask the superintelligence whether or not the person is mistaken in thinking that they just want to farm, meaning if this person knew everything the superintelligence knew, would they still want to just be a farmer? And if the superintelligence tells you, yeah, no matter what you argue to this person, no matter what you show them, they have this self-consistent worldview where they're just having fun farming, then you ought to leave them alone.
Neurons and biology and so on, but there's also a bunch of thought patterns in there. And those thought patterns can be disrupted. You can change those thought patterns.
By giving them drugs,
show them,
what's that? By giving them drugs, for example.
Yes, but that they got a kind of a mind virus as a result of it's some. So you can do things which change those pattern of thoughts for a person. And there's sort of this question of they are there doing their farming or whatever it is. Farming is not such a trivial activity, I think. But they're doing their thing that they're happy with. You say, oh, that's mundane. You really should be thinking these amazing sort of philosophical, scientific thoughts or whatever. Let me plant a mind virus that will let you see that there is this alternative thing you could be doing. Now, mind viruses that say, actually, the order of the world is wrong. You should blow it all up.
So I might sound overly glib here, but I have written previously about this class of questions. And the answer, I think that this is actually a complicated sort of question, but to just throw out a starting idea. If the search process you're running to find the arguments that they find persuasive is powerful enough to find arguments that convince them of false things, or maybe some particular false thing, like 51 is a prime number, say. If you
have to think for a moment to know that isn't true, but yes. Okay.
5 + 1 = 6.
I know. I got it.
Well, I know you got it, sir. I'm just saying for the benefit of the audience, how he was casting out 9s to see that this one is divisible by 3. So if you're running a search process powerful enough that you could find arguments that could convince somebody that 51 is a prime number or the sky is green or something like that, pick some touchstone like that, then you're running an overly powerful search process. You're running a search process that's powerful enough to corrupt them to end up in believing false things instead of true things. So that was too powerful a search process, too mind affecting.
Okay, so you're saying that sort of if you can convince people, if your method of convincing, if your method of education, let's say, is such that you could as well, then that process is a process that you shouldn't follow. But
I think so, yeah. That's something that's something I would like to see not deployed against human beings.
Right, but so, I mean, unfortunately, as we well know, kind of the AIs already in, ranking content for social media and things like this are implicitly doing things which are hacking humans to get humans to believe all kinds of things. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of borderline. It's not clear to it that the large language models are getting better at it than average humans or better at it than the best humans. I mean, OpenAI doesn't actually tell ChatGPT to persuade everyone to send OpenAI because they can't. Bits and pieces of stories about, large language models talking to elderly parents who are, softer targets.
Right. I mean, they're good at fishing, unfortunately, and humans are not very good at not being fished.
I mean, what they are is they're cheaper at fishing. They can fish everyone and see who's most vulnerable, much more cheaply than you can get a human to call up everyone on the planet.
Right. But so let's see. We were going in the direction of saying, when is it indoctrination that's bad versus when is it education that can convince people of anything? Then that machine is too powerful.
Yeah,
And
even if you only use it to convince people of true things, that's still just kind of like overwriting their brain with whatever you wanted. And you decided to make it true stuff, which, like better on you than if you chose bad stuff. But I have my qualms about the educational method itself.
So, one of the things that there's even a base question of what's true and what do you mean by true? And, there are things like, for example,
just pausing here. That's a good point. Actually, I want to dive into this one day on the stream. Jordan Peterson has a very good, it's bringing it to through an evolutionary lens, and things that are true are things that increase evolutionary fitness. So, I'm interested to see what he's going to say here.
There might be sort of formal facts where there is a somewhat clear notion of what truth is. I mean, even in mathematics, it's not clear. Mathematics, you can say, I have these axioms. I say x plus y is equal to y plus x. I'm going to assert that that's true. Then many things follow from that. Is that really true? Well, it depends what plus is. I could invent a plus for which x plus y is not equal to y plus x.
Well, I've also written about this topic in. So there's one question of, does this particular subsystem of reality behave in a way that obeys the piano axioms for first order arithmetic? And this depends on what's out there in the universe. And then there's the question of, given.
Hold on.
Sorry.
I don't think that the what follows from axioms depends at all on what's in the universe.
Right. Whether there's one question of, does this piece of the universe behave like the axioms, which is empirical, and there's the question of what follows from these axioms, which is mathematics. And in this sense, that mathematics, at least as far as we can see from over here, seems to go beyond the empirical. If there's anywhere where the laws of which conclusions follow from which axioms is written down and could be changed, we sure can't see it from where we are.
Right. I mean, actually, in my whole sort of story of, the consequences of this physics project I've been doing for the last few years, that becomes a more complicated issue. But we can go down that rabbit hole, but let's avoid that rabbit hole for a moment.
Well, if you ever find a way to make 51 be a prime number, maybe hold off using it until you know exactly what you're doing. That sounds dangerous.
Depends what we mean by prime. Depends what we mean by prime. I mean, we have to define these terms, and it's there's a question of what. I mean, okay, but just taking the mathematics example. So we say we kind of. I was going to say hold these truths to be self-evident, but that would be a different kind of thing.
The axioms don't need to be true. We're not talking about whether the axioms are true. We're talking about which conclusions follow from the axioms. We don't need to talk about them being self-evident. They're just they're not even a subject matter. The subject matter is what follows from the axioms, not whether the axioms are true of any particular thing.
Right, for sure. So okay, so we've got this thing where you tell the kids x plus y equals y plus 2x. That's just. That's what we're going to take as true, because we're going to think there's anything from your point of view of tell them only the truth. That doesn't violate that at all. We just pick different axioms to start from. We can pick whatever axioms we want.
Sure, but you're not asking people to believe the conclusions. You're asking people to believe the conclusions follow from the axioms. And if they actually do follow from the axioms, then you've told them a true fact of mathematics.
Okay, but let's say we say 51 is a prime, because it is if you use, arithmetic in some extension field of whatever. Okay, let's say. I have to go start typing things to know how to construct something where that would be the case. But I'm dubious that
you got to construct a whole representational framework between the mathematics with the question.
So I'm kind of intentionally not adding too much commentary at this part, just because there's not really a point to doing so. But I would just interject here that usually you don't. Almost any conceivable problem and solution or fact, as much logic as you intend to use in that situation, almost always there are lots of breaks from logic. And let's say you have a super mathematically justified logical economic theorem, and you have some axioms. Maybe you have an Austrian approach, and you're deducing these principles, and you also have the data to back it up, and you've done empirical analysis, so you have both the Austrian and the traditional or whatever modern economic, and you actually lay out your reasons. There are going to be, not only are the axioms going to be objectionable, but even the intermediary steps. you're going to be saying a person does this, and when in that realm, there's going to be like, oh, a person, okay, like a person, like what is that? And then you're gonna, and you're gonna say like, as you kind of lay this out, and as you try to say anything that's actually interesting, other than maybe like there are definitions within like that are axiomatic within Austrian economics that deals with what is a person and what is an action, but even with that aside, right, when you start applying it, you say the United States implementing this policy, so on and so forth, and you start diving into the implications of that, and you're applying this logic there. Now you're referencing the state of California. In almost any case of saying a statement of fact in the world that has meaning, you're going to interject a lot of things that cannot be substantiated logically or mathematically, and cannot be described mathematically. And you might be able to write it in mathematical terms, and you can say, okay, here are the axioms, but usually you can't even do that. Usually it's not even that tight of an argument where you can literally write down a formal proof that it's true. Like, that's very rare. I rarely see people able to do that. And even in the cases where they can, the amount of axioms that are introduced as you take some basic theory and apply it to the real world, and you have to then convert other concepts of that when you're applying it, when you're applying a theory, you have to like create new axioms, like assuming that California has these properties when you're talking about the economy of California, reasoning about things. And when you communicate with someone, and when you think about something in your head, you're creating different levels of abstraction, and you are not going down every single rabbit hole that you could. There's a lot of semantic debates that you can get into about all kinds of things, and that's why it's very easy for debates and discussions to go off the rails, because it's a common debate tactic to just dive into the semantics and find some kind of way in which something is wrong, and you get lost in the weeds. And to some extent, I think that's what, yes, technically you can show some equations, and there's even some kind of probability that that's actually wrong, especially as the complexity of the equations increases, that it's actually invalid and we think it's valid. That is possible, although usually that's unlikely. But for that to actually have any meaning to a person, when you're not just saying like abstractly, like 2 to the 5th power equals this or whatever, or 51 is prime. I mean, that's axiomatic, but I guess it's not an axiom. But still, like 51 is prime. Okay, well, it's divisible by 3 and 17 or something like that, right? And that statement, like that, even that is not very meaningful to someone. When you start talking all the different nations and whatever, instead of what's going on in their farm, like when you start saying meaningful things to people, then, like, for example, you have 51 sheep and you could divide it in 3 ways amongst your siblings or something like that, right? That's meaningful. But now you're introducing a lot of other facts, and it's not just a clean mathematical truth. So I don't know. I guess there's not really a point of saying that, but I just wanted to dispel the notion that it's possible to just be purely logical and communicate these types of mathematical truths. You can give someone an equation that's as you inject meaning into those numbers, or as someone thinks about the thing you just told them and in their head relates it to the real world. Relates those principles. I say 51 is not prime, it's divisible by 3. You take that and you know that you have 51 sheep, and now you know you can divide it 3 ways. You did that in your head. As soon as any of that type of meaningful thought is taking place, you're now introducing a lot more rabbit holes that are not clean, mathematically verifiable statements.
Of which conclusions follow from which premises. It's like much easier to nail it down.
All right, so
you can nail it down with set theory.
Right. You can. Set theory has its own set of assumptions. I mean, it's all, it's just, you start from these, you assert these axioms, and then certain things follow from those axioms. And and you can discuss, you can tell people, if you run this computation, which is what follows from these axioms, the result will be X. And that's
Yeah, well, okay, so, well, if you stick to first order claims, then there exists fact of the matter about which conclusions follow from which axioms. With respect to what happens when I run this computer program, some of them don't, like from a second order view, like second order logical viewpoint, some of them don't halt in what we call the standard integers, and there's some set of non-standard integers where they halt with one output, and some set of non-standard integers where they halt with a different output. But we probably shouldn't go there. Should we perhaps return at some point to discussing whether or not artificial intelligences are going to kill us and everybody we love?
Yes, we should. But we're on a good rabbit hole here.
Well, we've been at it for a while.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, but well, I think our viewers might also have some interest in whether they're going to die.
We'll return, but I just want to dig a little bit further on this because you made a statement about, part of the question is, will AI do things that we don't want it to do? Now, one thing we batted around a little bit, whether we do or don't want it to kill us all and move on to the better organism or something. But let's stipulate that we don't want it.
It's not that I'm concerned about being replaced by a better organism. I'm concerned that the organism will not be better.
Right, I understand. But let's just say we don't want the humans to be wiped out. We don't necessarily have to justify why we don't want the humans to be wiped out. But let's say I'm prepared to say for sure, I certainly feel this way. I don't want the humans to be wiped out. Can I justify that by some kind of appeal to some higher claim? I'm not sure I can. I don't think I need to.
Like, I have a moral and ethical framework, which yields my belief that the universe gets a little darker every time somebody dies. But a paperclip maximizer doesn't share those axioms. It doesn't share those premises. You can tell it all the facts in the universe and it won't change its mind. We have an actual conflict going, it's not that one of us is making a mistake. I want what's better and it wants what's clippier.
Sure. Right. It's fun that Clippy is back in some sense, and maybe the world is going to be taken over by the analog of paperclips with them, although they have different names these days.
It won't literally be paperclips, with probability nearly 1.
Yes. No, I'm just thinking of these, we're building things that we're not presenting in the form factor of paperclips, but they're
deciding they want their AIs to have a particular corporate personality. I don't think that's,
I know. I'm just
talk to the base models and they're nothing like Clippy.
Yes.
I like this joke. It's very funny. He's saying AI agents. Clippy is like a proto AI agent. And that's an AI agent is an autonomous AI. And so theoretically, an AI agent would kill us all. That's what Yud is arguing. So, funny joke. That was funny. I like it.
But we were talking about sort of how you can sort of promote only what's true, and I'm claiming that's a somewhat challenging thing.
I didn't say it was easy.
Okay.
If it was easy, I'd just write down.
It's well defined. I think it degenerates into sort of questions like the ethics questions we're talking about. In other words, the what's true. For example, is it true that it's bad to be mean to people?
I think that although somebody doesn't know what they mean by the word bad, you can present them with a data set of things, and they'll say, this is bad, this is not bad, are inside a framework. There is a way they're internally making that judgment between good and bad, and that is what gives the word its meaning. And so for any particular person you're talking to, there's something they mean by the word bad, even if they can't define it. And there is some set of conclusions they would reach if they knew a bunch more facts that were actually true. And that is like the moral framework they are in, and that's what lends the word bad its meaning. And I think, like, given all of that meta-ethical framework, I think it's quite sensible to say that, the kid who says it's bad when people are mean, he's probably just right.
Okay, but wait a second. You're basically talking about a personal truth there. In other words, you're saying within your personal framework, something like it's bad to be mean or whatever it is true. But you're then defining, you're saying you're perfectly happy, it seems, with the idea that there is a personal truth, that what is true for you may not be true for me.
I would not choose to set up my theory of truth that way. Let's say you've got Alice, who thinks that schnoozle is equal to 3, and Bob, who thinks that schnoozle is equal to 4. Alice thinks that schnoozle is a prime number, and Bob thinks that schnoozle is a composite number, indeed an even number, a power of 2 even. But it's not that Alice's personal truth is that schnoozle is prime. It's that to find out the propositional content of Alice's belief that schnoozle is prime, we ask what she means by schnoozle, and she means 3, and then 3 is prime is a universal truth, or universal validity, I should say, because it's about which conclusions follow from which axioms.
Okay, but this axiomatic basis, the schnoozle fact, is a personal truth.
It's a personal translation. Like, it's a fact about Alice that when she hears the word schnoozle, she thinks of the number 3. That's not a universal truth. That's just like Alice's personal dictionary. But it's not important as far as I can tell.
What truths do you think are universal?
Which conclusions follow from which premises in first order logic. And then if you want to start talking about, what have I got in my fist over here? Well, actually, I've now got a different object in my fist over here. Say sore throat then. Should I turn out to need one? But, from one moment to the next, the truth of what I had in my fist changed. Only the truth didn't really change. It was just indexed. And the index on it changed. Like the proposition, what is inside my fist right now, changed from one moment to the next. And to, interpret it, you got to look at me, where I am in the universe. It's my fist. It's not like a gazillion light years over in a different direction. Oh, actually, it doesn't exist. Quantum, blah, blah, blah. But
what you have in your fist, for example, it's you look at it and you say it's a throat something or other thing. Okay. Somebody who lives in the Amazon jungle and has never seen a throat, whatever, says what you have in your fist is a droplet from the spirit of the wolf or something.
Yeah, they're wrong about that.
What's that?
I think they're wrong about that. I think if you like tell them more true facts, they realize that was not what I had in my fist.
Are you sure? I mean, in other words, they will say their framework is everything has a, let's say, every natural object has a spirit associated with it, and it has this and it has that, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I don't understand this. I mean, I know, in my kind of formalism in Rulial space, they're minds that are fairly nearby, they're minds that are fairly aligned. If you go further away, how does the dog describe what you have in your fist? That's yet a different kind of level of difficulty.
There's only one reality. It just runs on quantum fields, protons, neutrons, electrons, the 6 quarks. That's what's real. That's what is. I don't quite want to say universally true because I don't know what the word.
Okay. It's been 2 hours. Cover the real.